Hello and welcome to today's Material Musings.
Welcome to Material Musings, where the fabrics tell their tales. Eco-dyed colors from the garden, slow stitches where the heart exhales. Painting cloth and weaving stories, wall hangings blooming bright. Come create with Amanda, where your creativity takes flight.
So, hope you are well, and I hope that when you see this episode that you're filled and inspired with projects and creative things that you can do. So today I'm looking again at things that we can embellish. So we previously looked at the embellishments using the beads and the jewellery as embellishments on fabric, and what I thought I would also do is show you how I've created what I call sculptural looms. They're woven pieces attached to wood, and a lot of my fabric work, the smaller pieces anyway, they usually have a wooden dowel that the wood has been harvested from the garden. So it's either the wood from the cotton plant, and like in this particular one, I've used cotton in the headpiece here and then embellished it with beads. Or I take pieces from moringa. That's actually mahogany, moringa. So the wooden dowel bit is moringa wood, and this is mahogany wood. And I've only done a very few of those because it's a hardwood. So it's, you know, unless you've got the tools, I've just got my little paper sander and my wood burning tool, and you know, so you work with the resources that you have. But the moringa is really easy to cut, so once it's dried it's easy to cut, and it's easy to wood burn into it, and you can create some wonderful things. The only thing again about working with wood, depending on where you are, it's whether you can transport it. So for me, for a lot of these projects, I would suggest that the person who purchases one, they have to get like just a small dowel. There's always going to be a space to fit the dowel. This is a decorative piece. Unfortunately, you do have to go through a process with wood, and I've had it where I've posted work and they've cut into the woods. It's an art piece and they've cut into it. So if you're local, then it's fine, but if you're not. So the other thing that I've been doing, and maybe that's a thing to think about, what kind of alternative materials can you use that will be as strong as the wood? Now I'm thinking, and you could incorporate that into the art piece. And I'm thinking, the first thing I thought of was paper clay. So there's a thing, because that is really strong. Well, the one that I make is really strong, and you can carve into it. You can, you know, you mold it before it dries, and then you can actually carve into it, and it's solid. Yeah, but you do have to do a lot of layers for that. So what I wanted to show you was some of these sculptural looms, as I call them, and how I've again used the beads and the jewelry on them. And essentially what they are is, so woven pieces attached to the wood. So let's take a look, and I hope some of them inspire you, and I'll show you some ways in which, you know, you can make your own small loom and create a woven piece. Okay, so let's get to the table. Okay, so we have quite a few here, so I will go through them one by one, and you might see one that inspires you and you think, oh yeah, I'd like to try that. And we will look at some that have not been attached to wood, and then I'll show you some of the looms that I use on a regular basis, yeah? Okay. So I want to do that one last because it's one of my favorites. These two are my favorites, so I'll do those last. Okay, so right, so the looms actually came about when I was growing my own cotton. I still do grow my own cotton, but I was so excited and wanted to do something with it. I went and got a spindle carder. And a spindle is a thing that will help you spin it into yarn, and I'll have to show you that next time. I'll show you those things next week, yeah? And so I got those, and I wanted to do it on a small scale. There is a weaver on the island called Ade, Sylvester Ade Clark, and he's a master weaver, and he's got these big machines that weave, and he's had a couple of, you know, exhibitions, demonstrations, and yeah, he's really good, really encouraging. And from that I thought to myself, well, I don't have access to a really small one. He had a tabletop one, and yeah, still the price, especially if you're a beginner, isn't, and he had to import that one. So if there are any wood carvers who can make a loom, then that would be useful, just like the small ones. But anyway, outside of that, you can make your own small looms, and I'll show you, as I said, later on. So it was kind of born from that. I visited an exhibition that Sylvester did, and I did a little interview with him and just showed him working on the loom, and you know, he was talking about the length of time it takes to thread the loom, and it's amazing to see the work that he produces. But I wanted to still be able to do it on a small scale. I'm not going to be at this point in time making the large pieces, because he does fabric, he makes scarves, bags, everything, which if I can share some as we go along, I will. And so I started to make these, and I thought, I want to make the woven pieces, but I want it to be an art piece. And I was again messing about with the wood in the garden, and so the idea was born. And I thought, if I could make a frame, because if you look at the looms, they, you know, you could use a wooden frame and then attach the thread, and I wanted it to be a permanent fixture. And after that, it was just like, okay, now I've got somewhere I can add the cotton. So after I had spun my cotton from the garden, I used it in some of these projects. So you can see here. And it's Barbados Sea Island cotton is one of the best cottons in the world. I think second is Egyptian cotton. But it's a beautiful fabric. It creates a beautiful fabric. Okay, so then I went back into my supplies and looked at, well, what do I have as jewellery that I can add to this? I mean, of course you can do there's decorative things that you can do whilst you're weaving. But for me, well, these came out of, okay, I'm just going to do the straight back and forth. And I do appreciate and love looking at the ones where it looks like a landscape and, you know, you've got the different textures. But I liked adding, you know, I had all of these beads, had all of these broken jewellery and things like that, and so I wanted to add. So yeah, this is just taken the yarn. All of this yarn is wool based. I do have some, I did start some of the ones that are not on these with just other, it's not wool, it's acrylic yarn that I used at times for crochet. So that's this one. So, you know, once I've even got jeans in here, so this is jeans material. So once you've attached the threads, you then start weaving back and forth. And then what I did was the figure of, you know, across and then across that way, and held it securely. It's got a hanging piece there so it can be hung, and it's the natural wood, and I did some wood burning in there as well. And then I just attached the beads, so I held it like that, and then used either a fine thread, sort of like embroidery thread, because you know it's going to be strong but it's not going to be visible, and just some beads, and that's some broken jewellery there. Yeah, so that's that one. We've got this one as well, some larger beads, and then on the bottom of the this is a recycled material wrapped in burlap. Yeah, and then what I've done is at the bottom add beading. I made some discs and stuck those at the end, and then yeah, just decorated it in additional beads, and this at the front here. It's quite pretty. Here's some smaller ones that I did, because by now I was just like, oh, every time I dry a piece of wood, I just add the loom, create the loom, and then just continue to add. And this has got jewellery on both sides there, and some feathers here. Again, these were just from earrings, so you know, you can really, even if you've got like just one piece of jewellery, you know, you can add it and it will look really nice on a piece. It could be the focal piece of the jewellery. Here's just some small ones that I was just like, we'll just add these on here. We've got the woven bit going that way, and it's wrapped around. And then here's a really thin one that I did. It's got the Sea Island cotton, Barbados Sea Island cotton, and I did both sides. Yeah, there's another couple of small ones that I did. Again, with the Sea Island cotton, I was just going with what I had, and this is just the yarn that it's like acrylic yarn rather than the wool. And this one as well. And I was able to, I painted this wood, and I also burnt into it. And then I think it's probably unfinished. This has just come out, because this should be tied. This still probably has to have its the bit that would hang it so you could put it on a wall. But it's all those details that, you know, you can even decorate the back, and that's a nice surprise for whoever, you know, has it. They can turn it around and look at it and just be inspired by all the different pieces that you know, are sparkly, or you know, the woven pieces. I do a lot of experimentation as well. So we've got the Sea Island cotton and then just ordinary wool, and then I've combined it. Where I've been weaving it, I took another yarn that I had and put in. It was very textured, and just put a little bit of jewellery just there. Let's just come in, you can see it. So it's the smallest of, you know, just a really small piece that's glistening there. And then on the top, we've just got like hints of beads in different places. And that's what the back looks like. And the side, let's just come out a little bit more. But yeah, and they're just really nice small pieces of art that, you know, you can have, and tells a story, because, you know, obviously the wood itself, the moringa wood, the Sea Island cotton, the beads, every aspect of these pieces has a story to tell. You know, I'm not its first owner in terms of the jewelry even, and the beading, and so there's this kind of embedded story that comes along with each art piece. Here's another one, slightly larger. I think this size, let me see what size this one is. I'll come out a bit more so you get a kind of good view. So I think it's about 5 by 5. Well, this is, yes, no, it's 6. This is 6.5 by 6.5. Yeah. Again, moringa wood, dried, painted, and with the woven piece, you've got it on both sides. Because you know, obviously, if you do one side, you'll only see the back of the main side, so I wanted the back to have detail that was equally as not as showy, but it just kind of made it just feel like it needed to feel. And with the moringa wood now, for some of them I would bore holes directly through the wood, so through the center. It's got a soft center, and you can add, and I would add, you know, different jewelry bits. So it's to you there. So you could add, that's just a pin, but it gives it a nice little finish. On the end there. I could do one on that side, innit? Just a small pin. That one might not go. Oops, yeah, it did. So it just, you know, finishes it off really. See, yeah, but yeah, so this has got beads, we've got the jewelry bits, got wooden beads at the sides here, at the top here, and the bottom. So these would have been on a long piece of wire going through the center of the piece. And then the different types of yarn, and then the Sea Island cotton, and just some really tiny embellishments there. Yeah, so again, looking through everything that you have to see how they can be incorporated in the story that's unfolding as you create. Okay, we're heading towards some of my favorite pieces. So this is what I was explaining in terms of how the back would normally look if you didn't weave it as well. So this one I just left as is. At the front, as I was weaving, these are the ends. and I decided just to allow them to remain. And again, it's part of the story, and one of the things that I wanted to do was to add beads on each of these. So when it was hung, you know, they would hang down. And it's not like, you know, as is on one side is on the other side. They're all kind of randomly spaced. This side kind of more outweighs with the threads, because this is actually the side that I would usually finish the thread on. One of the things you can do is, if you have, you know, ends like this, you can just weave it back in. So that's what I could have done. But as I say, I want to experiment and do some additional beading on these. And these are the larger beads. This was from a necklace, and I've incorporated these here and used additional beads to hold it in. And again, this is moringa wood. Actually, no, this is a cotton. The wood from the cotton plant. But they're all nice weights. I mean, even with the moringa wood is quite light, and when you add use that in a project, the project will be a lot lighter. This is slightly heavier. Yes, it is bigger, but you can also alter the weight by, you know, the amount of elements that you actually put on it, the weight of the yarn that you use, or the beading, the sizing. Yeah. And this is probably one of my favorites because it uses all of the things that I really enjoy working with. It's actually a recycled material in here, and and these are, you know, those I go through a lot of pens, so as opposed to throwing them away, let's repurpose them. They can be used as dowels. So that's an alternative in terms of when you're dealing with, so that's maybe what I put, you know, the wood. So you don't have to have the wood, but you have a decorative piece. And once these recycled dowels have been finished with, they look gorgeous, you know, and we can add you know, jewelry down here and beading along it. We could add fine beads. So on this I've used resin figure, and this was Crazy Plastic, I think it was called, and I had placed additional elements in there to give it this look. And then we've got this, which is a vintage bead, and the smaller beads from jewelry that I had. And you know how, you know, a piece falls off, one piece breaks, and then you've got these left. And these, I've had these for over, gosh, a long time. And then we've got additional beads here, and I started attaching some beads. We've got the air-dried clay discs here, and then we've got these really tiny, small, they're not beads, but they're beads that you have to use an adhesive to stick, but they create a nice effect and nice texture. Yes, so that's some of the sculptural looms. I do have more that I've worked on, but they're some are in other people's collections, and I've got some in my next door. Okay, so that's some of them. Now let's look at, we'll look at the looms that I've got, and then we'll look at some additional small looms that I've created that I will then put on other projects. So here's one of the largest looms that I've made, and this is from a picture frame. Yeah, added the wood and added the threads, and I've made a few on here. I haven't made this large size, but that will be for another time, because I do have quite a bit of yarn that I want to get through. It's acrylic yarn, and it's, you know, we talk about looking at recycling and resources. So where there aren't any recycling for that kind of material in place, you don't want to just throw it in the bin because it ends up in landfill. So how can you use it in a project where it could be, I mean, if it's the microplastics from the acrylic, you know, maybe if you put it behind glass, then that reduces it. So you can still have an art piece, and you could then still, you know, be able to use it in some way. Or you can, there's a lady who cuts up a lot of yarn and then mixes it with some glue, natural glue that she creates, and then she creates new material, so flattened sheets that she then carves and makes into art pieces. But that's the largest one. Let me show you these before I get onto the smaller pieces. So this one, I had some fabric that I dyed, and I had I wasn't sure what to do with it, so I thought, let me just weave it, and that's what this is. So this would go on another project, and I've used I think they're knitting needles. No, they're wooden dowels, bamboo sticks as the frame. Yeah, so again, you know, it's just like, you don't need to throw it away. You could then use it and then create something else with it. This would be nice to be added to a project and then have some jewelry bits or some slow stitching. I could definitely work on that, yeah. And I could actually add some of the smaller pieces I'm going to show you to it and make it a project. And this one, this was some of the wool I had left over. It was just like the ends of, and this is the kind of thing where I'm saying, you know, you can do kind of landscapes and have that, you know, all the different textures, and that's what I did with this. I kind of did the weaving. We've got some Sea Island cotton here. I didn't have enough, so then I got some yarn on either side. So this is all the Sea Island cotton as well. It's amazing. I am just amazed when I see it. Like, you go out in the garden, you see it growing. Sometimes it grows quicker than I can process it, because obviously I'm working on other things, so it's just like if I was just focusing on that, I might be able to kind of deal with it better, and even, you know, maybe dye some. Yeah, so that's that. And then all of this wool that I thought, let me just, and even some of it as the side of the frame is crocheted and added to the frame. Should we look at the back, see what's going on there? This was the original frame. Yeah, and it's kind of very loose. So I could potentially take it off this and attach it, maybe attach it to some fabric. But I had, you know, just experimented and played, and I crocheted into the sides and then just attached them there. And then we've got this one it's got that there. So yeah, that's one of my largest ones that I've done, that I've woven. So let's look at the other kind of small looms that I have. So my first loom, which is not here, I'm not sure where it is, but it's this. These are made on the same principle. It was a cardboard loom. So it's not like this. I then revamped it because I wanted to make the process easier, and it came without these pieces here. And then as you're, as you're weaving, you find that you're having to, so it's going in and out, but you're having to lift it up a bit more. But with these elements here, it helps lift it up, and it just makes the weaving process a lot easier. So there's loads of tutorials on how to make a loom, but that's how I made mine, and I found that to work really well. The only thing that I used with this is because it's a very thin yarn, it's very loose, it needs to be taut, a bit more taut, so I would have to address that. Yeah, but that's essentially, good to go. And this is the same, so it's the same process. I used cardboard, and I've done the same kind of principle, but what I've done on the top is add some nails, because this I just wanted to see how that would work. So you would put the yarn around the nails, as opposed to going, I just did it like this, so wrapped it round. But what you would do is put it around the nails. And yeah, that one's good to go as well. So they're my two small ones. And then the other thing I did make was, again, just some really tiny ones. So, and this for me was like, say you were just starting out, you just wanted to see what the weaving was about without having to invest in a big machine. What could you use? And I created these small mini looms that I then started to make these small pieces. So I just cut out holes with my hole punch and then thread it through, and you've got this, and then I could cut it off when I was ready. Okay, so we'll look at some other small ones, and we'll look at some of the other ways in which I've used them. So right, so these were ones that I made previously. Again, I then looked at all of the yarn that I had and said, if I'm not going to stitch with it, or if I'm not going to use them to crochet, how else can I use them? And this is what I started to do. I just started to weave with them. It's a needle I use to then go in and out. And so we've got, again, I use this one a lot, and you can make different sizes. You just have to be mindful about keeping the tension so that it doesn't, like, quite a lot of mine dip in where I start pulling them too tight, yeah, all the different yarns that you may have, and it may be just a small piece, but a little can go a long way, in terms of a project, or just be added as an element. Look at this one, using this thin, it's this same kind of yarn that I've used to create this woven piece, and then just added, again, just another yarn to give it a different look. I really love the feel of this one. We've got this one, and with this one I started to add jewellery. Haven't yet added it to a piece. I'm not so keen on, I wanted something hanging, but this isn't quite what, looking at it now, something as heavy as this, but it's the wrong colour. This blue and silver is fine, and yeah, again, just using up the different yarn. This is probably one of my favourites. These were my favourite yarns, but I only had a small amount, and I made it, add the bead in. The red in it is the woof. Anyway, the bit that goes down, And again, looking at this, the red, I love the beads at the end, but it needs to be a different colour, or I need to add some red bead in somewhere. But I love this blue and brown beads, and these were all I had, you know, just this, and so it was able to make a project. And that does look so pretty, doesn't it? Look at it. Doesn't that look gorgeous? Just the colours. And then a necklace that I had bought, I'd bought them because I used to have like a stall, and I would make my own jewellery and then buy jewellery, and these were the beads that came, and it was just like, I'm going to take this apart. And so that's what I do with a lot of the ones that I still have left. I just take them apart and then, you know, add them to projects. So what would you do with some of these? Yeah, so you can add them to other fabrics like this. So I started to use smaller pieces, add them to fabric, and they can then go, I'll show you how I've added it onto a project. So this particular one is one that I made. I think it's probably one of the first that I made. Look at the, the change in the size here. But it was just like, that again tells a story. You know, there's so many of us that could relate if we use this as a symbol for the road that the things that we've experienced, the roads that we've gone down in our lives. You know, sometimes you think you have so much time. When you're younger, you think that, and as you get older, you realize the quality of the time that you spend is important, because time is fleeting. Yeah. So again, the stories, and yeah, I just then go through my fabrics and see what I've got. These are jeans that had been, you know, slow stitched. I thought, let me add. We've got some other smaller bits there, and then what I had in this container anyway was just some ones that I had slow stitched on, and considering, well, do I want to add, you know, this, which pieces do I then want to add to these smaller pieces that will then go on to be on another piece. And then we've just got a few more here, some smaller ones where I then started to be a bit more careful so the shape is more unified. Yeah, you just take your time. So this is wool, and again adding beading, and this one here using larger beads, looking at the colours. I wove, this had been woven, and then I went in and I slow stitched on it with burlap, and then I added the beads. And so this is another nice piece that can go on another project. And I think that's the thing to think about. I mean, you do have to consider the kind of space you've got and what you can do in the space. But I would say, you know, just start making it. You make, not necessarily knowing what you're making it for, but it's a process that you're going through. You know, the act of being in a creative process is important to your health and well-being. It's important to your mental health, and it can release certain tensions. It can enable you to think about certain things in your life, come to terms with certain things, work out certain things. And so using this as a therapeutic tool is something that's important. You don't have to think about, well, what am I going to do with this? Am I making this? And whatever. You know, it's about experimenting and playing and allowing yourself to touch the materials, look at the texture, look at the colours. All of that impacts on your health and well-being. So, as I said, these are the woven pieces. I do some crochet, and again, these are things that I make them and it's just like, oh, can they go on something? Oh, look, here's a perfect fit, and then that gets stitched together. We're waiting the next thing that can go on it. So I hope that that has been useful, and you know, if you're a weaver, you know, I admire what you do and the talent and the skill that goes into it. And if you're dabbling and getting your feet wet, then you know, I hope you try it. And there's so many things that we then can incorporate into this process and make our own. And that's one of the reasons why I went on to make the sculptural looms, because I wanted to incorporate some of the things that I do and with activities that I enjoy doing as well. Okay, so let me know how you get on, and I shall see you again.